I've always liked Sith characters, even before I knew how to articulate why. Something about them always felt richer, heavier, like they were always allowed to carry more emotional weight than their Jedi counterparts. Jedi often represent control, clarity, and detachment. Sith, on the other hand, are raw, messy, and human, and somewhere between fascination and sympathy, Darth Maul slowly become one of the clearest examples of why the Sith are so compelling. For a long time, Maul was treated like a symbol rather than an actual person. A striking design, a terrifying presence, a quiet enforcer built to look dangerous and die loudly. When he first appeared, he wasn't meant to linger in the mind as a character, only as a moment, a weapon swung once and discarded, and for years, that's all he was in the wider conversation around Star Wars. But Star Wars has a strange habit of returning to the characters it once abandoned, and in Maul's case, that return didn't just expand upon his role, it exposed him. What followed wasn't a power fantasy or just a mere redemption arc, but something far more uncomfortable. A sustained look at what happens to a person when their entire sense of self is built on pain, obedience, manipulation, and rage. What makes Maul stand out to me, especially as someone drawn to Sith characters, is not how strong he becomes, but how little his power gives him. He gains influence, territory, followers, and fear, yet none of it fills the void left behind by a childhood stolen, an identity imposed upon him, and a life framed entirely around serving someone else's vision. His story isn't about ambition fulfilled, it's about ambition hollowed out. Seen this way, Maul becomes one of the most human characters in the saga, not because he's gentle or good or redeemable, but because he feels real. He reacts like a person whose life was decided long before he had a chance to choose, and as a Sith fan, that's what elevates him. Not his rage, not his menace, but the quiet, persistent ache underneath everything else. Maul's tragedy is not that he suffers, this is Star Wars after all, but that his suffering never leads anywhere redemptive. There is no final transformation where the pain suddenly makes sense, no moment where the galaxy rewards his endurance. Instead, Maul becomes a long-form portrait of damage, a character whose survival is far beyond his own narrative purpose, forced to confront what's left when revenge, power, and hatred fail to provide meaning. His story demonstrates the cost of a life built on obedience, pain, and manipulation, and it is this deep, persistent humanity that makes him one of the most compelling Sith in Star Wars canon. The ache under the armor, the questions he can never fully ask, and the weight of his existence are what make Maul resonate so strongly, not as a villain, but as a tragic, fully human figure within the saga of Star Wars. Hey, if you like what you see, don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring that noti bell because it really helps out. Maul's tragedy begins with the absence of choice. Unlike many Sith who fall, Maul is raised already fallen. His life is shaped before it even begins, molded by the will of Darth Sidious into something precise and disposable. He isn't seduced by power, he's trained to exist solely for it. That distinction matters because from the start, Maul is not encouraged to want, only to obey. Pain is not a consequence of failure, but a teaching tool. Violence isn't a last resort, it's a language. In this environment, individuality becomes irrelevant. The only identity Maul is allowed to form is a weapon, an apprentice, and an executioner. And once that function is fulfilled, he has no protection against abandonment. When Maul is defeated and discarded, it isn't just a physical loss, it's existential. The master he lived for has moved on, the plan continues without him, and Maul is left with a single thing that was always encouraged. But hate without direction is corrosive. It doesn't empower you, it can break you down. This is what separates Maul from many other Sith. Characters like Vader or Dooku make choices rooted in belief, ideology, or personal loss. Maul never got that luxury. His rage isn't born from betrayal, it's programmed, manipulated, one might say. He doesn't chase meaning because he desires it, He chases it because without it, he has nothing. Maul's early life strips him of innocence, but his survival strips him of certainty, and that certainty is what makes him relatable. He isn't evil for evil's sake, he's violent because violence is all he knows how to do, and when that violence no longer earns him belonging, he spirals not upward but inward. What follows is not the story of a villain rebuilding himself into something greater, but of a person desperately trying to justify his continued painful existence. Maul doesn't return to the galaxy to dominate it, he returns because disappearing would mean accepting that his pain was meaningless, that everything he endured led nowhere, because this is where his humanity quietly takes root. Not in compassion or regret, but in confusion, in grief, in the question he never gets to ask out loud. If I was made for one purpose, and that purpose is gone, what am I now? As a Sith, Maul is undoubtedly powerful. As a person, he is unfinished. And that imbalance, it defines everything that follows, setting the stage for the exhausting, heartbreaking, rather beautiful pursuit of meaning that dominates the rest of his story. Every choice, every act of revenge, and every fleeting triumph is colored by the life he was forced into, making him as tragic as he is unforgettable. One of the most painful parts of Maul's story is that he eventually gets the things Sith are supposed to want: authority, influence, fear, an empire of his own, however fractured, and yet each step forward only seems to underline how empty those achievements really are. In the Clone Wars, Maul rises again, not as an apprentice, but as a leader. He commands syndicates, manipulates politics, and bends others to his will. On paper, this should be a payoff. This is what the Sith ideology promises: power earned through endurance and pain. But Maul's reaction to this power is telling. He doesn't become calmer, he doesn't become fulfilled, he becomes restless. The reason is simple. Maul doesn't want power for its own sake, he wants validation. Every throne he sits on is less about ruling and more about proving that he mattered, that what was done to him wasn't wasted. Unlike traditional Sith within the Star Wars canon who hunger for control, Maul hungers for acknowledgement. He wants the galaxy to admit that he wasn't a disposable tool. This is why his fixation on Obi-Wan Kenobi goes beyond mere rivalry. Obi-Wan isn't just the one who defeated him, he's living proof that Maul should have ended. Every time Obi-Wan continues onward with purpose, faith, and identity intact, it reopens Maul's deepest wound. It's not hatred that binds them, it's comparison. And as his schemes grew more elaborate, Maul became increasingly aware of the machinations behind it all. He sees the larger game, he understands how Sith and Jedi alike are pieces moved by forces beyond them. By the time of Star Wars Rebels, Maul is no longer chasing domination, he's chasing understanding. The humanity that emerges in these moments is subtle, but undeniable. Maul's victories, though visible, carry no satisfaction. His survival is not proof of strength, but of persistence, because in a meaningless war, as he navigates these complexities, the audience begins to see, not just as a Sith strategist or a villain, but begins to see Maul as a man defined by endurance, obsession, and grief, whose inner life resonates far more than his outward victories ever possibly could. By the end of Maul's journey, there is very little rage left, only clarity. His final moments aren't loud or triumphant, they're quiet, resigned, and deeply, deeply revealing. What Maul finally begins to understand is that his life was never his own, that the Sith doctrine he lived by promised strength but delivered isolation, that revenge felt powerful only because it delayed grief. When finally faced with the truth of the galaxy's trajectory, Maul's anger dissolves into something softer and sadder: recognition. This doesn't make him noble, it makes him honest. And that honesty is devastating. For all his violent actions, Maul never loses his capacity to feel. He loses hope, direction, stability, but not awareness. When his story ends, it ends not with hatred, but with acceptance. That he was shaped to burn brightly and briefly and then be forgotten. As someone who has always been drawn to Sith characters, whether they are in canon or not, this is why Maul stands above so many others. His story doesn't glorify darkness, it exposes it. It shows the cost of defining yourself entirely by pain and ambition, the danger of confusing endurance with purpose. Maul's humanity was never in question, it was suppressed, buried beneath expectations, discipline, cruelty, and manipulation, and when it finally does surface, it doesn't save him. It simply reminds us that he was always more than a monster. The arc of his life demonstrates that power and survival alone are hollow victories, that understanding the world does not grant freedom from it, that identity forged in pain is difficult, if not impossible, to ever reclaim. Every battle, every loss, every fleeting triumph only emphasizes the emptiness beneath his armor. In this, Maul's story becomes one of the most human in the entirety of Star Wars. Not for his heroism or morality, but for the stark, undeniable truth of what happens when a life is built on someone else's design and someone else's hatred. Even in his final moments, Maul's presence is a mirror to the consequences of a universe that rewards power over understanding. He remains persistent, enduring, and painfully aware. He survives long enough to witness everything he sought and nothing he needed. The tragedies of his life, from being molded into a weapon before he could decide, to enduring betrayal and abandonment, to finally witnessing the futility of his revenge, coalesce into a portrait of a being defined by loss rather than accomplishments. It is this relentless continuation, even in the absence of purpose, that cements his position as a uniquely compelling Sith. Maul's story is not about just mere villainy in isolation, it is about endurance, grief, and the capacity to carry unbearable weight without a single bit of relief. His journey challenges viewers to consider the consequences of a life lived in service to someone else's agenda, the fragility of identity when all personal choice is stripped away, and the profound isolation of those who outlast their creators. There is a brutal honesty in watching Maul exist beyond narrative necessity. He is punishment, survival, and a witness all at once. And it is precisely this dense complexity that makes him resonate so deeply, transforming a character from a fearsome icon into a tragically human figure whose suffering lingers long after the final scene fades to black. Darth Maul isn't tragic because he loses constantly, he's tragic because he survives. He lives long enough to gain perspective, but not long enough to escape. He understands the flaws of the system that created him, but never finds a way beyond it, and in that space, between awareness and inevitability, his humanity becomes undeniable. For me, as someone who has always loved Star Wars characters, especially Siths, Maul represents the pinnacle of what Sith storytelling can be. Not exaggerated evil, not spectacle alone, but consequence, continuity, emotional truth. He isn't redeemed, and he isn't glorified, he's examined. Maul shows us that the Sith way doesn't just consume the galaxy, it can consume the self. That power without agency is always meaningless, that pain when it finally becomes identity leaves no room to heal. His story doesn't ask us to forgive him, but it does ask us to understand him. Maul's humanity is tragic not because it's hidden, but because it's visible far too late. We see the person he could have been only after everything else has been stripped away, and that's what makes his arc linger long after it ends. Not the blade, not the anger, but the quiet realization that none of it ever gave him peace. It is a meditation on the cost of shaping one's life entirely around others' expectations, and a study of the fragility of identity when all choices are made for you. It is a testament to endurance without reward, survival without fulfillment, and insight without comfort. Maul's story lingers because it is deeply human, and it resonates precisely because it avoids easy resolutions. He survives, he suffers, and he understands too much to ever find comfort or closure. The enduring tragedy of Maul is that he exists in full awareness of his losses, the futility of his vengeance, and the hollowness of the power he accumulates yet cannot escape. Watching him live beyond his purpose forces the audience to confront the implications of agency, destiny, and the often invisible cost of ambition. It challenges us, the viewer, to rethink what it means to win or lose in a universe obsessed with black and white morality. Maul is not simply a villain or a spectacle, he is a cautionary reflection on survival, rage, and the human cost of being made to serve someone else's design. It is this depth, this layered and unflinching honesty that elevates Darth Maul from a visually striking antagonist to one of the most tragically human characters in all of Star Wars. The story he leaves behind is not one of victory or redemption, but of profound and unforgettable human tragedy, reminding us that the weight of a life built on pain and control is something no power can ever undo.